Well, good morning, everyone. And Gary Samuelson was just days ago, about a week, that we were down in Fort Lauderdale, or right next to there, at the new world headquarters, the laboratory of two amazing scientists, where we manufacture some of the best, most exciting things, and just a few gathered together. And oh, I am just certain it's the start of something big. It's a start, but it's actually more accurate, I would say, a fresh start, because we've all started many times before, and what we're doing is stuff that we've done many times, and there really is a market for what we have. In fact, a demand and a need. When people use what we have, it changes things dramatically. It was just October that I really got to know you, driving down to a similar lab for several hours, and just got to hear your story. First off, you're just a really good guy, but my goodness, you're smart, and just an original thinker too. I'm excited about that, and maybe just to kick this off, I just think we are at a really good place right now. This moment in time, you can just feel it when you kind of go through and analyze what this is. I kind of think of maybe somebody brilliant like Warren Buffett, where he's thinking, what's the risk, what's the reward, and why would this be a good opportunity? And boy, this redefines being at the right place at the right time. And oh my goodness, and not just an opportunity, but really a way to just really make a wonderful difference in the lives of, I believe, thousands, maybe millions of people, and just a few short years to come. There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. But Gary, tell us a little bit about you, and I guess we're going to talk mostly about just the magic, amazing qualities of silver. And you arguably could be one of the most leading experts of silver in the whole world. You got some really cool insight about what it is and what it does. So maybe start out with just how you got interested in that, and why you became an atomic physicist, and how that fits in with life.
Well, first, I think that this is more than just a fresh start for me, because we've been through different situations. My whole outlook on life is we need to get the emerging technologies that will work and are important for people out to the people that need them. And the emerging technologies that I'm considering the most important are those which will detoxify the body and protect us against biological problems and all of those things which we are facing today. And I could feel the electricity, by the way, when we were down there in Rick's place, because there we're actually building for the first time, I believe, in history, or in MLM history, at least, we're building the technologies that will be those lifeboats, you might want to say. Those technologies that are very important, that can't be found anywhere else. And we're doing it as a team, and a science team. And it's kind of fun, because finally, Rick and I get to kind of banter back and forth about the science behind this. Now, I'm a nanotechnologist and an atomic physicist, so I approach this a little bit from a different angle. And I'll tell you, you've probably heard my story, but I'll say it again. When I was a small boy, I loved science. I loved truth. In fact, my heart beat to understand, everything about what nature offered. I'd ask my dad, why is the sky blue? My dad he's also a physicist, by the way. He has a PhD in physics. And so I would ask him that, and he says, oh, it's the stimulated dipole interaction between the triple bonds of nitrogen. Oh, I thought, ooh, okay, all right. That sounds great. and so, stimulated dipole radiation, I didn't understand any of that stuff. But now that I've studied physics, I do. And it's absolutely fascinating when you understand that, the blue is created by actually vibration of nitrogen molecules as they're stimulated by the sun. and things like that. So I like to think of these things on the atomic level, but there's nothing more beautiful than a life. I mean, have you ever just taken a look at a plant that's growing and you see all, like the flowers? It's going to be Mother's Day tomorrow. Flowers and such. The processes of life have always just absolutely fascinated me. And when I went into atomic physics, I wanted to go into a specialty, which is atomic medical physics. So how can we apply the knowledge that we're gaining as far as, atomic physics into the area of biology, into life? And then later on, we start to realize that it really doesn't matter how much you know. It matters how much you are able to apply what you know to help people, to do something for people and that was and a lot of the people that actually go into the medical fields feel that way. They want to apply their knowledge for the benefit of people. And so that's where I went. Then my life turned a little bit interesting because I started into nanotechnology. We developed nanoparticles that we could engineer to go into the body and to attack viruses and bacteria and things like that, and nothing else. That they would be safe and effective. And we were able to find ways of producing them, and they were very expensive. I mean, I built lasers in my laboratory to ablate metal particles, to ablate silver. And you'd use high-powered pulsed lasers, and you'd vaporize the silver and then figure out how to condense it into little particles that were uniform size and shape that you could predict, and you utilize in biology. And that's what we did. And then I got into cell signaling. I realized, that one of the biggest advances in biological science is, well, what's happening between the cells? How are they talking to each other? And the way that they're talking to each other is organizing and orchestrating this beautiful thing in life. And so, it's just been an incredible journey for me, Dave. I mean, the absolute beauty of life and what we are. I mean, this is it. We're here. We can see it. It is just remarkable. And so, to be able to get these technologies that we're developing out to the people that need it, and then to see, there's nothing like it, Dave. To see eye to eye, face to face, somebody that you've helped, and they come up and they say thank
you. It's a business, but so much of the income is spiritual or a psychological paycheck, and that is just absolutely rewarding. I had a personal experience with a zeolite a couple of years ago, and I've been really actively sharing it. And one of the things that just fascinates me is I would say 80% of the population has never even heard of the word zeolite, let alone the ideas of being able to make it systemic by making it teensy tiny, not as small as silver, but still on a micron level rather than a nano. But just, wow, micronization, activation, different things like that. And then a lot of people have heard of silver. A lot of health nuts maybe have a bottle of colloidal silver in their cupboard. We've probably all heard of babies. That's just kind of the law that if you're born, they put silver nitrate in your eyes. I'm thinking also, I think silver was just a miracle breakthrough for burn victims. Most people, what did them in when they were extensively burned was infection, and creating a silver-based antibiotic that they would spray on that kept them alive. That just there's some maybe some wonderful things, and I hope you can kind of talk about that, because your silver is different.
Well, no, I would love to. In fact, I have a presentation, if it's all right. Could I go through that?
Oh, please.
Yeah, it's about 15, 20 minutes, and it explains most of this.
Okay.
Okay, I'll share my screen if I can here. Ooh. Having the same difficulty as you here. There we go. Okay, well, like you said, silver. Why are we even interested in silver and silver nanoparticles and silver colloids? They've been around for for what, 50 years, 60 years now. And silver, before we had the modern antibiotics, were actually the antibiotic of choice for doctors. They didn't have anything other than silver to deal with. And so that was very important. I always like to point out that, that nature has the answers, that life has been evolving as far as we know for billions of years, and that we interact with our environment and we adapt to our environment. One part of the environment that we have adapted to is that of silver. Silver is fairly common. But when before I do that, I wanted to say this. This is the key to becoming successful and having health. Being able to make a choice. You know, a lot of people don't understand what they have. And if they are educated in what they have, they can make a choice. They can make a choice to be healthy, and then they can achieve that health. And the silver nanotechnology is just one of many different types of technologies that will help you to achieve your optimal health. And detoxification, for example, we were talking about the zeolites. They have certain properties that attract heavy metals to them, like lead, arsenic, and such, and mercury. Well, that's very important to get out of our environment. And for millions of years, billions of years, those zeolites have been taking these things out of our environment. When we put them back in the environment, then we have to use the zeolites again inside of our body in a small and cleaned zeolite. That's what he has. But silver has been used to preserve food forever. In the Roman Empire, they used silverware, you know, to preserve and to have food. And back in the pioneer times also, they used silver in their foods to preserve, like in silver and milk. And so, but you know, nanotechnology has allowed us to become much more powerful. Because if we take a silver coin and we split it in half, now we have 2 silver coins. You know, we slice it like bread. We have 2 silver coins that are twice as effective. Then we can have 4 times effective. Using nanotechnology, we can have 100,000 times more of efficacy of the silver. So we can preserve foods. We can take care of harmful biological components that are in the environment that spoil the food. And so you know, this is very important. And silver, of course, is then in the natural environment of the earth. It's been there for a while. It's in our soil. It's about 0.3 ppm, 0.3 parts per million. There's different types of silvers all over the place. But it's always been known to be, you know, a natural antibiotic, as well as, you know, something that is valuable. So it's expensive too. And so only the most aristocratic people could afford silver. They would put silver spoons in their mouths, for example, when they had a cold or problem, you know, with the nasal to get rid of the cold. And so those things have been around. Now, silver colloidal particles that you can produce naturally, basically, are of all different types of sizes and shapes. So as far as nanotechnology is concerned, they're unpredictable. We don't know what'll happen with them when they come into our body, because the size and shape of the silver nanoparticles are important. If you have a huge thing like a colloid and you ingest it, it can get stuck in your tissues, for example, or it can dissolve into a silver ionic solution and form insoluble silver salts and such that will stay in your system for long periods of time. And so, you know, just creating silver colloidal silver nanoparticles or particles is not enough. You can see here, you know, here's a picture of them in a microscope. This is electron microscope, and they're all sorts of different sizes and shapes. Some of them are absolutely huge. I didn't have a chance to do this, but if you can imagine, I'll use your imagination. Take a big, huge particle like this, or these clumps. And then imagine that we can break this down into 10 million tiny particles, 10 million uniform, perfectly shaped and sized particles. Now here's a fairly, you know, these guys are about 100 nanometers. In order to get them down to really where they're safe, effective, and mobile inside of our tissues, you need to get them down to about 7 nanometers. So that's like about the size of this little guy here, if you can see that, or the size of that little guy. And you want to break them all down so that they're about the same size. Not only do you do that, but you're using less silver and getting much more potency, you know, in the action of the silver. So, and they're small enough now to interact with biological molecules. And the question is, well, which biological molecules do they interact with? And why is it important that we use silver for this purpose? So, you know, the silver colloidal particles are, you know, all over the place. I wanted to show you, like, Google it. You can Google this stuff. Ionic silver, if you take a microscopic picture of it, it looks kind of like this. And silver nanoparticles then look sort of like that when you're looking at them in the microscope. It's very, very clear understanding. Why do you see all these little grainy things? Well, because when they have to dry the silver solution in order to be able to put it on this microscope slide, or what they call the matrix that they put into the electron microscope. And when they do that, the substrate kind of dries, like, you know, like spots on your windshield. You know, these are just kind of like silver spots on the windshield. They really aren't particles. They were dissolved silver molecules, or silver atoms, as ions that just kind of form a spot, if you wish, when you dry them up. However, nanosilver, when you dry it, it doesn't lose its particle shape and form. It forms a particle. The way that you can tell that it's a silver nanoparticle rather than an ionic form is that the ionic form is perfectly clear. And silver nanoparticles then have yellow color to them. And the color of the silver nanoparticles actually is determined by the size. So these guys are about 10 nanometers. They would be a yellow in solution. You know, in the water solution, they'd be yellow. And you notice that they're also very nice and crystalline and nicely formed, and they're uniform in size. So that's a way you can tell between ionic silver and the nanosilver. And it's important to understand, because ionic silver, as I mentioned before, is actually much more toxic and much more dangerous, because as it goes inside the saltwater solution in your body, it forms silver chlorides, which are insoluble salts. The body has a hard time getting those salts out of the body. In fact, Dave, this is really interesting. All biological organisms, plants, animals, and everything on Earth have learned to take the ionic silver that's in the environment, the dissolved silver, and turn it into nanoparticles. So that they actually takes and builds nanoparticles. I'll show you that in a little bit here. But anyway,
going back to that other slide, I saw a picture where someone was making a comparison, and it looked like it had clumped. And isn't that something to do with when they dry it, that it gets closer and closer together, and then all of a sudden, like to make it practical to stay, you can't go beyond a certain concentration of those little tiny silver balls, or else they might connect. Or
Oh, that's why you need an atomic physicist to make these guys. Okay, first of all, you need to be able to make them absolutely uniform so we can predict exactly how they'll interact with our body, right, with our human body. But we also, when we dry them on a slide, like say they do clump together, we have to make them stable. So, if they're not stable, they'll just kind of clump together and fall out. They won't look like this. You know, they'll look kind of grayish. So that you can tell that they've destabilized, or they're too large or clumped when they look grayish.
Hey, just along that line, also, I've heard if you have ionic silver, that if you had that in solution, you could just throw some salt in there, and it would precipitate out and make silver chloride, I guess. Any comments on that?
Yeah, well, the University of Utah, that's what they did. The first thing they did with our silver, they saw the color, the shape, they took pictures of it, and they wanted to see if there were silver ions in there. They have something called endotoxicity. In order to have medical grade type of consumable, you have to have an endotoxicity less than 0.5 EU per milliliter, which is the kind of how many toxins per milliliter you have, and we have 0.33, and they said, well, silver ions are much more toxic than that. They go in the 20s and 30s, and so the question was, well, do we have silver ions? Well, they threw salt in it. It's easy. You throw salt in it, you stir it, you heat it a little bit, and if the white, kind of a cloudy white stuff forms, precipitate and goes to the bottom, well, that's your silver chloride. It's insoluble. So with ours, of course, they saw absolutely no reaction at all with the salt water.
So if there's no salt in your body at all, you could maybe take ionic silver and it wouldn't precipitate. But oh wait, there's salt in your body.
Yeah, that's sort of the stuff that makes up all of the fluids in your body. So you're not going to get away with that. Yeah.
Every cell essentially is a little bag of salt water.
Yeah. So anyway, ionic silver, even though it is antimicrobial, it also can be dangerous to advanced forms of life. And that's the reason why you've seen this before, but I love to show it, because here are the type of things we want to interact with. We want to interact with biological molecules. In particular, we don't want the silver nanoparticles to interact very much with the ones that are carrying on the processes of life inside of our cells. These are biological molecules. They're self-assembling. They're doing all sorts of incredible things. They're talking to each other, And so those are the type of things we do not want to interact with very much. But there are things that we do. And it's very interesting that the silver nanoparticles actually are able to tell the difference. Or maybe life is able to tell the difference, what is a silver nanoparticle and what isn't, because it's in our environment, right? And so when these living organisms, it's a little taking apart and putting together these microtubules, and then using them as communication channels or roads, would you say, to pull the proteins that we produce to the right places that they're needed. I mean, these things are just absolutely amazing. If we want to look at nanotechnology, though, I'm going to go down here. We need to engineer a nanoparticle that is just the right size and shape, so that it doesn't interfere with anything, but is able to interact with these proteins, these biological molecules, in a way that's safe. Well, nature has figured out how to do it. As I mentioned before, the size and shape of the particle, actually, it determines the electrochemical properties. So it becomes very important to get the right size and get the right shape if we want to have an optimal nanoparticle. The right size and shape happens to be spherical nanoparticle, about 7 nanometers big. And that's it. If we have the right size and shape, just like having the right screwdriver to operate on our cell phone, there are different types of sizes and shapes that are needed. You get the right size and shape, then you know exactly what it can do inside the cell. And that's very important. Colloidal silver and other types of silver is kind of haphazardly made. It has all sorts of sizes and shapes, and they're not able to do specific things, unless you just happen to find one that's the right size and shape, among many. So here gives you an idea. Here's a typical colloid. It's huge, it's clumpy. And down on the other side there, if you can see it, is this tiny little nano-silver particle. And that nano-silver particle then is the right size and shape so that it can interact with biological molecules. The ones that it interacts with the most? are these proteins that are on the outside of viruses, on the outside of bacterial membranes and such. That's why nanoparticles, or at least silver in any form, even the solid metal form, is antimicrobial. It kills bacteria, kills the bacteria but in order to be able to interact with viruses, you've got to make them very, very small. Luckily, you can take a big colloidal particle like this using nanotechnology, break it down to millions of tiny little particles like this, and then you have the tools that you need in the body. Does that make sense? You know?
Oh, that's beautiful.
Okay, great. So plants have adapted to their environment, and plants actually suck up dissolved silver into their plants, into their roots, along with dissolved boron, zinc, manganese, copper, all sorts of things. What do they do with the silver? You know, some people say, well, silver is a heavy metal. Not really. It's been around in the environment. It is a heavy metal in the sense that, you know, it is a large atom. But what these plants do is they attach certain molecules to it and then put it together in a silver nanoparticle. So that's what nature does. Inside plant cells, inside animal cells, these little mechanisms have been built to deal with silver in advanced life forms. Bacteria don't have those things. So the bacteria react with this, what they call the silver ions. And this would be the ionic silver. And actually can't deal with it, so it's toxic. But higher forms of life actually put it together and form it into a silver nanoparticle, which is much less toxic and much more biocompatible. And they use those silver nanoparticles for different things, and it's fascinating. Anyway, by the way, here are the silver nanoparticles created inside a plant, different types of plants. They're different sizes and shapes, and they have different types of contaminants. It's hard to get them out of the plants, so they're expensive. And then, in fact, that's a problem. You know, if you really want high quality, back in my days, you know, as a nanotechnologist, we would create an 8-ounce bottle of these highly uniform silver nanoparticles, and they would cost $2,000. You know, it cost thousands of dollars just to create them and to isolate them. And then it took a day's time in order to do that. So, you know, obviously this is something that's not thing. Now, what I did is I said, well, we've got to be able to mass produce and distribute these. So using my knowledge in physics, I figured out a way that we could use plasma ablation rather than huge lasers and such to ablate and get uniform nanoparticles that would be just perfect. And so here's the ones we use in the Avini Health. They're light yellow color. You're produced by plasma ablation in pure water. There's no contaminants, no surfactants, no capping agents. There's more than 1 trillion particles per drop, and we can produce them at much less than much greater amounts and much less price than that. So we've had them analyzed. The University of Utah analyzed them, said they're pure silver. And this is a size, by the way, distribution. So between 1 and 10 nanometers, ours are about 7 nanometers plus or minus 2. And in the size distribution of the nanoparticles. We found that the endotoxicity, also from the University of Utah, was well below the 0.5. In fact, their lab water that they use to create clinical medical quality solutions, their lab water is about 0.5. Ours is actually 0.33, which is well under that 0.5. And so it qualifies as a medical grade solution. Actually, can be used in medical grade applications. And so we also did antimicrobial course tests. you know, and here we had a reduction of more than 99.999% of the bacteria. This was at only at 1.5% concentration. That means we take 1 part per about 90 parts of water, and still in a dilute solution, it's considered a antiseptic. And so, you know, yeah, it's considered an antiseptic. It could be a topical. We could sell it, you know, as something to spray on your hands, and it's great because it stays there and it kills, or it kills bacteria. You might as well just say it as it is. So anyway, the antiviral nature of NanoSilver is very interesting, though. This is something that you know, colloidal silvers can't do. They're not the right size and shape. So even the flu, now this is 30-second exposure to a NanoSilver, the H1N1 virus, and we used a Corona SARS virus also. Again, 99.999%. So it also qualifies as an antiviral. Even better than that, it's something that you can take inside of yourself. And you want to ask the question, well, how in the world does it, how in the world does this work? How is it antiviral? So we take a virus that has a glycoprotein that we know about, it's glycoprotein 120. And these are the proteins that are used at the fusion points of the virus, which means the points at which the virus enters the cell, living cell. In order to be able to reproduce, a virus has to attach to and enter a living cell called fusion. And that allows it to get inside. Well, here are these 10 nanometer particles. These 10 nanometer particles are the exact same size and shape as 7 nanometers that are needed to attach to these points on the virus. And it really just kind of closes the door on the virus. It can't inject, it can't fuse to a cell. It can't infect a cell. And so, you know, here it is. It's a physical attachment of a particle there. The virus can't do anything about it. So, you know, it's pretty cool. Also, you know, throughout many decades of research have been spent to see about how much silver can we tolerate. And we're not talking about nanosilver, which is very mobile and can move in and out of tissues. We're talking about colloidal silver even. You know, how much silver can we actually tolerate? The World Health Organization has a no observable adverse effect level, NOAL. And that says, well, the NOAL, which is very, very low, that means we don't see anything. In order to see an effect, we actually have to get sometimes 100 times more, or even 1,000 times more concentrate, more ingested, in order to be able to actually see something that is an adverse effect. Well, in this case, you know, the very least 350.335 milligrams per day taken over 70 years in a typical adult is what we consider, you know, a non-adverse amount. Well, ours is, you know, we only take it as suggested amount of 0.02 per day. So it's about 17 times smaller than, and you could actually drink a whole bottle a day or several bottles a day for 70 years, and you still not have any adverse effect. The suggested amount is 5 sprays in the morning, 5 sprays at night, and a bottle will last you about a month and a half. And then if you have a challenge, you can take more. So, okay, isn't that cool? I mean, do you understand the science behind having silver nanoparticles certain shape and size?
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, do we actually have these silver nanoparticles in our product? And are they a uniform size and shape? Well, I showed you university studies. Here's some of the electron microscopic images. You can see these little particles. they're not clear. By the way, the ionic stuff would be like this kind of fuzzy stuff in the middle, you know, or the fuzzy stuff to this side would be what the ionic silver looks like. Silver nanoparticles are very distinct. And you count them. When you count them, you find that the greatest number of them are between about 3 and 9 nanometers in size. So they're you can see it visually. You know, they're pretty uniform there, uniformly distributed, and this is what they look like up close. This is fun. By the way, it takes us usually about 8 hours of setup time to get a good picture of these guys. That's not fun. But anyway, when we're able to produce them, here's a glycoprotein that I showed you a little bit earlier, I talked about earlier. These nanoparticles are about the same size as these glycoproteins. And they go in and out of cells and they don't interfere with very much, but they will stick to these glycoproteins in a foreign, because they haven't adapted themselves. That's my dog in the background. They haven't adapted themselves. But I guess he gets excited about these things too. You know, we use our nanoparticles on our dog. So here's a nice way to think about it. When these proteins, these harmful proteins, have the keys to our cell, they can open the cell and get in. But if we take these nanoparticles and block that key, like this, boop, no longer can it get inside of our cells. So these proteins, these spike proteins and things that are foreign cannot enter our cells and can't elicit immune response, because the immune system is trained actually to attack these types of proteins. So it's not a good idea to have them around. Anyway, that's I'm sorry about the noise in the background. That's about it.
Well, that was fascinating. Thank you. Well, I think we probably ought to get the word out, let people know about this. I kind of in my mind, I just kind of imagine all these trillions of little balls going around, kind of like the Dutch boy that was just happened to be walking along, and it was the perfect time. He saw the dike, and there was just a little leak, and he ran, and it was small enough to put his finger in, and he saved the village. And that would be the time to use this, is before the dam is broken and the city is flooded. Get them while there's just a few of them. So I like kind of the idea. May you never know what you're preventing. But so I would think when you first feel maybe your eyes itchy or a scratchy throat or something, take a little extra of this, and you might stop a cold from happening maybe. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it does what it does. You know, we can't argue with the science here. You know, this has been proven throughout centuries of use, practical use. It's also been proven in our modern laboratories over and over again. So it works.
And I like the idea of being able to just take it and don't have to worry about toxic buildup or anything. I remember when you and Rick first got together, I remember Rick saying, I don't like silver, it can build up in the body, it can be toxic. And you saying, zeolite's interesting, but I don't like it because it's filthy, it's got heavy metals and different things. And now both of you love silver and both of you love zeolite, and because it's been specially delivered in just all upside and no downside. So it's pretty cool.
I love that comparison, because, you know, I said, it's dirty, and it is. But Rick found a way to clean it and micronize it so it can get inside of our body and be the perfect little garbage truck to get out the toxin. Well, you know, silver nanoparticles, you know, he says, well, they can be dangerous because, you know, of the different effects that they have. And that's true too. But if you get them the right size and shape, just the same thing. You know, you use science in order to be able to solve the problem. Then you have a very useful tool, and that's cool. You know, very cool. That's why we love it so much. I love to talk with Rick that way.
Yeah, well, I just can't wait for. There's probably going to be some more stuff coming out that'll be just super awesome, and so jump on in. The water's fine, and let's get the word out. And thank you for all you do, Gary. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you. Hey, Dave, can I show you, I mean, a really simple way to find what nanoparticles really are like? I mean, if you don't,
please.
you don't believe me. But, you know, I've told people, you know, people come out with, well, this type of nanoparticle is better than that. And I'm a nanoparticle, blah, 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 blah. And in most cases, they don't even have nanoparticles. It's mostly ionic silver. It's a clear solution. You know, you can't see any particles in the imaging and stuff like that. So let me show you, you know, a really simple way. Here's my screen again. I'm going to go into Google. And you Google, guess what? Silver nanoparticles. And you look at them. You can look at images of them, which are a little bit prettier. And those are silver nanoparticles. These, of course, are you know, not real images. But as you get down, you see the color is yellow. The real nanoparticles are you know, distinct types of particles, so there's no question. You can also see tons and tons of people if you were to do the ionic silver. You can see tons and tons. Maybe I shouldn't be showing this, but there's tons and tons, and you can look at it at your own leisure. But all of those things actually are not engineered. In fact, we're the only ones that have the engineered nanoparticles, the silver nanoparticles, that are actually mass produced in such a way that we can afford them. So anyway, just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
Food for thought. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, let's get some and pass it on to all of our friends and loved ones. So thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.